Her daughter canceled her doctor's appointment for a hair appointment. Marjorie Clark, retired nurse and widow, didn't argue. The only child she once protected without question, smiled and rushed off to her salon. By the week's end, the wedding venue Marjorie had paid for would belong to someone else. She'd spent decades as mom, now she was the keeper of her own priorities. And when her daughter came begging for the date back, the signed cancellation would answer for her. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Marjorie Clark stood by her apartment door like a soldier waiting for orders, purse looped neatly over her arm, insurance card in its little plastic sleeve, keys already in hand. The late morning light slid through the tall windows of her elegant downtown Savannah apartment, scattering across the polished hardwood in gold strips. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil from yesterday's dusting. She'd been ready for over 20 minutes, 15 for the drive, 10 for parking, 5 for the inevitable shuffle at reception. The elevator dinged faintly down the hall. Then there was a pause. No footsteps. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 10:42 a.m. Lena was late. Again. Marjorie paced once, slow and deliberate, resisting the urge to call. The appointment was for 11, her first in months. A lingering tightness in her chest, and the occasional dizzy spell had made her doctor insist she come in for a full workup. Lena had promised she'd drive her, so we can make a day of it afterward. At 10:48, the hallway finally echoed with heels clicking far too fast for someone in a hurry. Lena appeared, swinging her phone in one hand, car keys in the other, a designer tote hanging low on her elbow. Her hair was swept into a loose bun, but Marjorie could already see fresh blonde streaks peeking through. "Sorry, Mom," Lena said, breezing past her into the living room. Traffic on Bay Street was awful, and oh, don't be mad. I took care of the appointment thing. Marjorie's grip tightened around her keys. What do you mean took care of it? Lena dropped her tote onto the sofa with a thud. I canceled it. Dr. Patel's office was fine about it. They can reschedule you. She smiled as if she'd solved a problem. You'll thank me later. My salon had an opening this morning. I had to get my hair done before the engagement photos. Priorities, right? For a long moment, Marjorie simply stared. She didn't raise her voice, didn't slam the door. She just stood there, hearing the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant whistle of a tour boat on the river. Her chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't from her condition. You canceled my doctor's appointment, she said at last. Each word clipped clean. Lena shrugged, oblivious. You can just call them later. Besides, your checkup isn't urgent. This, she gestured toward her hair, is time sensitive. The words landed like an insult dressed as logic. Marjorie felt heat rising in her face, not the quick flare of temper, but the slow burn of something deeper. She set her purse down with deliberate care. Lena, you had no right to. Her daughter's phone chimed. Without looking up, Lena snatched it from her bag, already half smiling at the screen. Gotta run, Mom. Salons across town and Gina wants to go over centerpiece options this afternoon. I'll text you later. By the time the door closed behind her, the apartment felt larger and colder. Marjorie stood still for a moment, letting the silence press against her. Her eyes landed on the framed photo of Lena as a child, gap-toothed and grinning in a yellow sundress. That little girl had once clung to her hand in doctors' offices. Now she couldn't be bothered to drive her to one. The phone rang. Marjorie glanced at the caller ID. Sharon Willis. Her best friend always seemed to sense trouble before hearing about it. You sound tight, Sharon said the moment Marjorie answered. What happened? Marjorie lowered herself into the armchair by the window, still watching the slow churn of the river outside. She canceled my doctor's appointment, for a hair appointment. On the other end, Sharon made a low sound that was part sigh, part growl. You're kidding. I wish I were, Marjorie said. And then, because the words needed out, she told Sharon the whole thing, how Lena had shown up late, how she'd been dressed for the salon, how she'd treated Marjorie's health like a trivial chore. She spoke calmly, but each detail seemed to sharpen the air between them. Sharon was quiet for a beat. Marge, you still co-signed her wedding venue, right? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Marjorie's chest. She sat back, eyes narrowing, already feeling a different kind of clarity stirring in her mind. Marjorie didn't hang up with Sharon right away. The silence between them stretched, heavy but alive with possibility. She glanced toward the old oak desk in the corner of her living room, the one that held tax records, birth certificates, and most importantly, anything with a signature that could come back to haunt or protect her. Her slippers whispered against the floor as she crossed the room. The top drawer groaned when she pulled it open, the faint smell of paper and ink rising up like the breath of old promises. She thumbed past utility bills and folded receipts until her fingers found the crisp folder labeled Harbor View Events, Contract. Sliding it onto the desk, she sat down and opened it with the care of someone handling fragile glass. The words stared back in clean black print. Client, Marjorie Clark. Not Lena Clark. Not Lena and Ethan. Just her. Her own handwriting curled in blue ink on the signature line, her neat initials beside every clause. And there it was, the deposit receipt, her debit card, her money. A flicker of satisfaction rose in her chest, not joy exactly, but a quiet recognition of leverage. She reached for the phone and dialed Tom Hendricks, her attorney of 15 years, a man with a deep drawl and a memory like a steel trap. Tom, it's Marjorie. I have a question about the Harbor View contract. Shoot, he said. She could hear the faint clink of ice in a glass on his end, as if he'd been mid-sip before picking up. If I wanted to cancel, what's the penalty? Tom didn't answer right away. She imagined him pushing his glasses higher on his nose, scanning mental notes. You've got a 90-day no-penalty clause. After that, they keep half the deposit. How far out are we? Marjorie flipped to the event date in the file. 85 days. There was a low whistle on the line. Then you can walk away clean. Not a cent lost. For the first time all day, Marjorie felt the corner of her mouth tilt into something dangerously close to a smile. It wasn't petty, it was precise. Just then, her phone buzzed in her other hand. She glanced down. A text from Lena, bright with exclamation points. Trying out new nail colors for the big day. You'll love them. Marjorie stared at the message until it blurred slightly, the weight of the contract still under her palm. Without replying, she set the phone face down. Tom's voice came back, steady and knowing. Want me to draft the cancellation notice? Marjorie's gaze drifted to the river outside her window, sunlight glinting off the current like it was carrying secrets downstream. Her fingers traced the edge of the contract, and she felt the shape of her next move forming. Not rash, not loud, but deliberate. Her lips curved into a full smile now, one Lena wouldn't see coming. Marjorie didn't answer Tom right away. She traced the rim of her coffee cup, the contract spread open like a silent co-conspirator on the desk. Outside, the faint sound of a trolley bell drifted up from the street below, mingling with the river breeze slipping through the cracked window. Go ahead, she said finally. Her voice was steady, almost casual, but her pulse had picked up. All right, Tom replied, the low scrape of a pen against paper audible over the line. I'll handle the draft. You just need to sign it. I'll make sure the venue's notified immediately. Marjorie ended the call, feeling the same quiet satisfaction she used to get after stitching up a difficult wound in the ER. No applause, no fanfare, just the certainty that something had been done right. Her phone rang again almost immediately. This time it was Sharon. Well? Sharon asked, skipping any greeting. It's possible, Marjorie said, letting the words linger. Sharon's voice warmed with approval. Then we should do it in person. Walk out of there with a signature and no questions left hanging. Marjorie considered. Tomorrow afternoon. I'll drive, Sharon said without hesitation. You focus on keeping your poker face. I'll make sure the paperwork's airtight. They settled on meeting at Harborview Events at 2 o'clock sharp. When the call ended, Marjorie slid the contract into a leather folder, adding her bank receipt, a copy of the venue's cancellation clause, and a neatly clipped stack of email confirmations. Each paper made a satisfying whisper as it joined the others, the folder closing with a decisive snap. The phone lit up again. This time, Ethan. She hesitated, then answered. "Hi, Marjorie," he said, his tone easy and polite. "Just wanted to confirm you'll be at the rehearsal dinner. Lena's thinking about moving the start time up an hour, so we can have more daylight for photos." Marjorie glanced at the closed folder on her lap, a small smile flickering at the corner of her mouth. "That's fine," she said, her voice warm, even friendly. "Great," he said. "You're going to love the flower arrangements she's picked. Big blush roses, hydrangeas. She's really excited about it." "I'm sure she is," Marjorie said. And she meant it. Lena was always at her most enthusiastic about things that photographed well. When the call ended, Marjorie stayed in her chair a moment longer, the hum of the air conditioner filling the room. She imagined Lena somewhere across town, flipping through bouquet samples, never suspecting the tide already turning beneath her feet. That night, Marjorie made herself a simple dinner: grilled chicken, asparagus, and a glass of chilled white wine, and ate at the kitchen table while the sun sank over the river. The city lights began to blink on, their reflections trembling in the water, and she thought of the venue's wide glass windows overlooking the same view. Someone else would have that date now. Someone else would stand there in a white dress. By the time Sharon knocked on her door the next afternoon, Marjorie was ready. She wore her pressed navy slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a strand of pearls. The leather folder rested on the counter by the door, waiting to be carried out like a sealed verdict. Sharon took one look at her and grinned. "You look like you're about to negotiate an arms treaty." "Something like that," Marjorie replied. They walked to Sharon's car, the late summer air heavy with the scent of magnolia, and faintly salty from the river. As they pulled into traffic, the historic district rolled by in a blur of brick sidewalks, wrought iron balconies, and flowering window boxes. At a red light, Sharon glanced over, one eyebrow raised. "Tomorrow," she said, tapping the folder in Marjorie's lap. "We start the countdown." The Harborview Events building rose out of the waterfront like it knew it was the prettiest thing in sight. White columns, sprawling glass windows, and an arched front entrance framed with pots of blooming petunias. The air smelled faintly of salt and flowers, the breeze carrying just enough coolness to soften the late summer heat. Marjorie stepped out of Sharon's car, leather folder tucked under her arm. Across the street, a couple strolled hand in hand, pausing to admire the sailboats bobbing in the marina. Somewhere behind her, a gull cried out sharp and shrill, like it was in on the secret. Sharon smoothed her hair and gave Marjorie a sidelong glance. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," Marjorie said. Inside, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and tall vases overflowing with cream roses and eucalyptus. The scent was heady, expensive. Soft instrumental music floated through the space, interrupted only by the muted clack of heels on tile. From behind the reception desk, a woman in a sleek navy dress looked up and smiled. "Mrs. Clark? I'm Gina Torres, so nice to finally meet you in person." Marjorie shook her hand. "Likewise." Gina's smile was warm, genuine. "Lena's been such a joy to work with on the wedding detail. Are we finalizing the linen choices today?" Sharon shifted slightly, as if bracing for impact. Marjorie met Gina's gaze head-on. "No, I'm here to cancel the booking." For just a second, Gina's expression faltered. A blink, a faint crease between her brows before she recovered. "I see. Well, let's step into my office and go over the paperwork." The office was cozy, lined with framed photographs of smiling couples against the glittering backdrop of the Savannah River. Gina took a seat behind her desk, sliding a stack of documents forward. "If you're within the no-penalty window, it's a very straightforward process." "I am," Marjorie said, opening her folder. The papers she'd brought were arranged in perfect order: contract, deposit receipt, cancellation clause. She laid them out with the precision of a chess player moving her final piece. Gina scanned them quickly, then tapped a few keys on her computer. "All right. Your date will be released immediately for other booking. I'll have a formal confirmation letter printed for you in just a moment." Through the open office door, Marjorie caught sight of a young couple lingering in the lobby. The woman pointed toward a display of floral arrangements. The man nodded, smiling. She wondered if this couple might be the ones to take Lena's now vacant date. The thought didn't bring guilt, just a calm sense of inevitability. The printer hummed. Gina slid a single sheet of paper into a sleek folder and handed it over. Here's your cancellation confirmation. The refund should be processed within 5 business days. Marjorie accepted it, the weight of the paper strangely satisfying in her hand. She stood and Sharon followed suit. As they walked back toward the lobby, Gina's voice was still warm, though tinged with curiosity. I do hope everything's all right? Marjorie gave a polite smile. Everything's just fine. Outside, the sun had shifted, casting a golden shimmer over the river. Sharon let out a slow breath as they crossed to the car. Well, she said, that's that. Marjorie slid into the passenger seat, her fingers resting lightly on the folder in her lap. She felt lighter somehow, as though she'd set down something heavy she'd been carrying for too long. They had barely pulled away from the curb when Marjorie's phone rang. The name Tom Hendricks flashed across the screen. She answered. It's done on my end too, Tom said. I'll send a copy of the cancellation letter directly to Lena email. The corner of Marjorie's mouth lifted. Perfect. Marjorie hadn't even set her purse down when her phone began vibrating in her hand. She knew before looking who it was. Only Lena could call with such relentless urgency, like the sound itself was an accusation. She answered, hello. What the hell, Mom? Lena's voice came through sharp, breathless. I just got an email from Harbor View saying our booking has been canceled. Canceled. Marjorie stepped into her living room, the river light spilling in through the windows, calm and steady in contrast to the storm in her ear. Yes, she said evenly. I canceled it. The pause on the line was brief, just enough for the anger to coil tighter. You ruined everything. Do you have any idea what this does to the timeline? The flowers, the caterer, the band, they're all tied to that date. Marjorie lowered herself into the armchair by the window. Do you have any idea what it means when you cancel my doctor's appointment for a hair appointment? Oh my God, that is not the same thing. Lena's tone pitched higher, defensive and incredulous. We can reschedule a doctor any day. This was my wedding. In the background, Sharon's voice drifted from the kitchen. Put me on speaker. Marjorie pressed the button. You're on. Hey, Lena, Sharon said, her tone deceptively pleasant. You might want to lower your voice before the neighbors hear how you talk to your mother. This is between me and her, Lena snapped. Marjorie could almost picture her daughter pacing, gesturing wildly, phone clamped tight against her cheek. She'd seen that posture before, at 15, when a friend had worn the same dress to a party, at 22 when a professor had given her a B+. It was the same righteous fury, just dressed in white lace this time. Lena, Marjorie said, her voice calm but firm. I co-signed the venue. My name is the only one on that contract. I paid the deposit, which means I had the right to cancel. You did it to punish me, Lena accused. No, Marjorie replied. I did it to remind you that other people's time and health matter. You've been treating this wedding like the center of the universe, and you've forgotten there are other orbits. That is such a... Lena cut herself off, with a sound halfway between a groan and a growl. You know what? I don't even have words. I can't talk to you right now. The line went dead. Marjorie stared at the silent phone for a moment before setting it on the table. Sharon emerged from the kitchen with 2 glasses of iced tea, shaking her head. She's got a lot of nerve calling your health appointment. Not the same thing. Marjorie accepted the glass. The ice clinked gently, condensation already beating down the sides. She'll cool off eventually, or she'll try to bulldoze you into changing your mind, Sharon said. Just be ready. Marjorie sipped her tea, the faint bitterness of the brew grounding her. She wasn't angry, not in the way Lena wanted her to be. Instead, there was a steady, quiet resolve settling in her chest. Her phone buzzed again. This time she expected another round from Lena. Instead, the name on the screen made her pause. Ethan Price. She opened the message. I wish you'd told me first. I'm not mad at you. Marjorie blinked at the words, reading them twice. Outside, the river kept moving, carrying sunlight across its ripples, unbothered by the noise on shore. Something in her gut told her this wasn't the last unexpected current she'd see. By the next morning, Marjorie's voicemail was full. Every message was from Lena. The first was sharp with disbelief. "Mom, I don't even know who you are right now. Call me back." The second carried heat. "You've embarrassed me. Do you realize how many people I have to explain this to?" By the fifth, the anger had curdled into something colder. "You've crossed a line. I won't forget this." Marjorie deleted each one without listening twice. The apartment felt unusually bright, sunlight bouncing off the pale walls, the scent of fresh coffee curling through the air. Sharon arrived mid-morning, jangling her car keys. "We're going to lunch before you start climbing the walls," she declared. They headed down to River Street, where the cobblestones still held the warmth of the late summer sun. Tourists drifted past with ice cream cones, and the air was heavy with the smell of fried shrimp from the waterfront restaurants. They chose a table on the shaded patio of a small bistro. From there, the river was a constant, slow-moving stage. Tugboats pushed barges laden with containers, gulls dipped low for scraps, and the masts of sailboats clinked softly in the breeze. Marjorie stirred her sweet tea with a long spoon, watching the sunlight flicker on the water. Sharon, across from her, unwrapped a straw and jabbed it into her lemonade. "She's not going to stop calling," Sharon said matter-of-factly. Marjorie nodded. "Which is why I'm not answering." The server brought their lunch, grilled salmon for Marjorie, a chicken salad sandwich for Sharon. They ate in companionable quiet, broken only by the occasional comment about a passing boat or an overly ambitious seagull. Halfway through her meal, Marjorie's phone buzzed again. She braced for another voicemail icon, but it was a text. "Ethan Price. Can we meet? Just coffee. I want to talk." Sharon saw the name and raised an eyebrow. "You going to?" Marjorie hesitated, then typed back, "Where and when?" They agreed on the corner cafe near Forsyth Park, late afternoon. Marjorie tried to read his tone through the message. Polite? Resigned? Curious? It was hard to tell. After lunch, she and Sharon walked a short stretch along the river before heading back. The breeze carried a briny tang, mixing with the faint sweetness of pralines from the candy shop. The day felt deceptively calm, like the still air before a summer storm. By 4 o'clock, she was sliding into a corner booth at the cafe. The place smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, the low hum of conversation wrapping around her like a blanket. She ordered a small black coffee and waited. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, tall and slightly rumpled, like he'd come straight from work without stopping to check a mirror. He smiled faintly as he sat down, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. Marjorie nodded. "I wasn't sure what you wanted to talk about. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know Lena's upset. More than upset, but I also know you. And I know you don't do things without a reason." Marjorie kept her voice even. "I had a reason. I figured," he said, leaning forward a little. "And I'm not here to make you change your mind. I just want to understand it from your side." She studied him for a moment. He didn't have Lena's polished ease, but there was an earnestness in his eyes she hadn't expected. She sipped her coffee, letting the steam curl between them. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table, Lena's name lighting up the screen. He silenced it without looking at the message. "You're not wrong about her," he said quietly. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the clink of his coffee spoon tapping against the ceramic the only sound for a beat. "I've seen her be self-centered before," he said carefully, as though each word had to be weighed. "I just thought it was stress from the wedding. But lately, Marjorie finished for him. You've realized it's more than that." His gaze met hers, hesitant but steady. "She doesn't compromise easily, or at all. She's great when things go her way. But when they don't." He trailed off, looking toward the window where people strolled past under the park's moss-draped oaks. Marjorie didn't rush to fill the silence. She let him sit with it until his attention came back to her. Ethan, do you know why I canceled the venue? I figured it was money, he said. Or maybe something between you two I wasn't aware of. It was because of my doctor's appointment. His brow furrowed. Your appointment? She told him. Slowly, without drama. About waiting by the door that morning. About Lena arriving late and announcing she'd canceled the visit so she could make a hair appointment. Marjorie kept her voice even. But the memory of standing there, purse in hand, still made her jaw tighten. She didn't ask. She didn't even tell me until it was done. Marjorie said, I needed that appointment, and she decided her highlights were more important. Ethan shifted in his seat, the discomfort visible in the way he smoothed his palm over his jeans. That's not okay. No, it's not. Marjorie folded her hands in her lap. And I'm not reinstating the booking. That decision is final. He looked at her then, not like someone judging, but like a man slowly rearranging the puzzle pieces in his head. I wish you'd told me sooner. I could've, I don't know, talked to her maybe. She wouldn't have heard it from you. Marjorie said. She doesn't hear it from anyone unless it's praise. They left the cafe together, walking down the shaded path that bordered Forsyth Park. The late afternoon air carried the scent of cut grass and damp stone, cicadas buzzing from somewhere high in the trees. When Marjorie got home, Sharon was already perched on her balcony with 2 glasses of sweet tea, waving as if she owned the place. So, how'd it go with future son-in-law? Complicated, Marjorie said. Taking her seat beside her friend, she relayed the conversation in full. Sharon's mouth twisted into a wry smile. Good for you, Sharon said. It's about time someone stopped rewarding her for bad behavior. Marjorie took a slow sip, watching the river catch the fading light. He thanked me for being honest. That's because he knows the truth already, Sharon said. He just needed permission to admit it. They sat in comfortable silence until Marjorie's phone buzzed on the table between them. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a notification from social media. Lena had posted a photo of a wine glass on a candlelit table, captioned, "Funny how some people claim to love you but can't stand to see you happy." Sharon leaned over, read it and gave a low whistle. She's fishing for sympathy. Marjorie didn't comment, but her eyes lingered on the screen a moment longer before she set it face down. The post was vague enough to spark curiosity, sharp enough to draw sides. Somewhere out there, the story was already being told, just not the real one. By morning, Lena's post had collected more than just likes. It had gathered allies and skeptics in neat, predictable rows. Some comments dripped sympathy. So sorry you're dealing with this. Girl, you deserve better. Others were probing. Wait, what happened? A few were blunt enough to raise eyebrows. If it's about the wedding, that's between you and your family. Marjorie didn't reply to any of them. She'd seen enough online spats to know that truth rarely survived the first dozen opinions. By 10 o'clock, her phone began buzzing with private messages. A cousin she hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Is everything okay between you and Lena? An old neighbor from the suburbs. Saw a post from your daughter. I'm here if you need to talk. Even one of Lena's bridesmaids sent a cautious "not my business, but I hope you two work things out." Marjorie answered them all with the same line, copied and pasted without flourish. Thank you for your concern, but I'm not discussing it. Around lunchtime, Sharon stopped by, bringing sandwiches wrapped in butcher paper and the smell of fresh dill from her kitchen. She kicked off her sandals and perched on the couch. Your silence is driving her crazy, you know. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. You think? Oh, I know. Sharon unwrapped her sandwich, the paper crackling. If you clapped back, she could spin it, argue it, make it all about her. But this quiet. It's like holding up a mirror and making her sit with what she sees. They ate in companionable quiet, broken only by the muffled honk of a tour boat horn from the river. Later that afternoon, Marjorie's phone rang again. Ethan Price. Hi, he said, his voice tight. I just wanted to let you know. Lena's spiraling. She's calling everyone, telling them you pulled the rug out from under us for no reason. I'm sure she is, Marjorie said evenly. I told her I don't want to be in the middle, but she keeps trying to make me pick sides. There was a pause. like he was weighing his next words. I just don't want this to blow up more than it has to. Marjorie thought of telling him it already had, but she chose not to. You take care of yourself, Ethan. When the call ended, she carried a book out to the balcony. The late sun painted the river copper and gold, and the breeze carried a hint of brine. Somewhere nearby, a saxophone played, the sound drifting like smoke from a street corner performer. She read in the fading light, turning pages slowly, letting the steady hum of the city replace the noise of the day. The occasional ping of her phone, more messages, more notifications, was ignored. By the time the first stars appeared above the dark silhouette of the bridge, she'd finished her chapter and poured herself a small glass of wine. The city below seemed calmer, like even Savannah knew the difference between storms worth chasing and storms best left to burn themselves out. Her laptop, left open on the kitchen counter, chimed with a new email. She crossed the room, the stem of the glass cool in her fingers, and glanced at the screen. From Tom Hendrick's subject, refund confirmation. She clicked it open. Marjorie, just confirmed with Harborview's accounting department. Full refund approved. Check will be mailed directly to you within 3 business days. 3 mornings after Tom's email, Marjorie opened her mailbox and found the envelope thick, cream-colored, with Harborview events printed in a looping navy script. It smelled faintly of paper stock and office toner, the way bank envelopes did when they'd been printed in a hurry. She carried it upstairs without tearing it open. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the mantel clock and the distant sound of a tour boat captain narrating some Civil War trivia over the loudspeaker. Marjorie poured herself a cup of coffee, set it on the counter, then used her letter opener to slice the envelope with a smooth, precise motion. The check slid out. The amount was as expected, several $1,000s. Her name alone stretched across the pay to the order of line in bold type. For a moment she simply looked at it, the ink catching the morning light. She thought of the months Lena had treated this deposit like her personal dowry, of the way she'd thrown around my venue like it had been willed to her at birth. No, Marjorie thought, this was hers. At the bank, the teller greeted her with a bright, "Good morning, Mrs. Clark," and didn't blink when she slid the check across the counter. The satisfying click of the stamp, the faint perfume of printer ink, it all felt final. The deposit was in her account before she even left the lobby. When she returned home, Sharon was waiting on the balcony, sunglasses perched on her head, and 2 paper cups of iced tea sweating in the sun. "Well?" Sharon asked, handing her one. "It's done," Marjorie said, settling into the chair beside her. Sharon took a long sip, then smirked. "Guess wedding haircuts cost more than I thought." Marjorie chuckled, a soft, warm sound that surprised her. Apparently so. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan, "The wedding's on hold." She read it twice, her pulse skipping in that way it did when news was important but not yet fully formed. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she set the phone down and moved through her day, watering her potted herbs, folding laundry, taking Molly the cat out for her slow leash-guided lap around the courtyard. For 2 full days, Lena didn't call. No voicemails, no text tirades, no cryptic social posts aimed in her direction. The silence was startling in its own way. Like the absence of cicadas after dusk, Marjorie filled the space with quiet pleasures. An afternoon nap, a stroll through the historic district with Sharon, a slice of peach pie from the bakery near the square. She hadn't realized until now how much energy had been siphoned off by bracing for her daughter's next demand. It was late on the second evening when her phone lit up again. Ethan Price. This time it wasn't a call. "Marjorie, I'm not sure I'm going through with this." She read the message slowly, the weight of it pressing into the room. Outside, the street lamps had just clicked on, their yellow glow pooling on the brick sidewalks below. Somewhere, a couple laughed, their footsteps fading into the night. Ethan's words stayed on the screen, black letters against white, a line she knew would change the shape of everything that followed. The knock came hard enough to rattle the glass in the front door. 3 quick strikes, then 2 more, like the drummer in some impatient marching band. Marjorie was halfway through her first sip of morning coffee. She didn't need to look through the peephole to know. When she opened the door, Lena was standing there in workout leggings and a fitted windbreaker, hair pulled into a tight ponytail that made her jawline look even sharper than usual. Her eyes were bright, not with cheer, but with the kind of energy that burned more than it warmed. "We need to fix this," Lena said without preamble, stepping inside as if the threshold was just a formality. "I've made some calls, and if we act now, there's a chance Harborview will give us the date back." Marjorie shut the door gently, then leaned against it. "I'm not rebooking." Lena spun toward her, incredulous. "You have to. Do you realize how insane this is going to look? People think the wedding's off." Marjorie's voice stayed level. "That's not my concern." "Oh, of course not." Lena's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Because this isn't about me getting married. It's about you proving some point." Marjorie crossed to the kitchen, set her mug down and folded her hands on the counter. "It's about priorities, Lena. And I've made mine clear." "That doctor's appointment was important to me," Marjorie interrupted. "And you decided it wasn't." The air between them was taut, carrying the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional gull cry from the riverfront. Lena's breathing came quicker now, her arms folded tight across her chest. "You're unbelievable," she said finally, voice low but shaking. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." Marjorie didn't flinch. "You're responsible for your own embarrassment." For a moment Lena just stared, her jaw working like she was trying to chew through her own anger. Then, with a sharp twist toward the door, she yanked it open. The slam that followed reverberated through the apartment, rattling the picture frames on the hallway wall. Marjorie let out a slow breath and reached for her coffee. The cup was still warm. Not 3 minutes later, there was another knock, lighter this time, accompanied by the muffled voice of someone calling, "Open up, it's caffeine delivery." Sharon stood there holding 2 paper cups, steam curling from their lids. "Saw your daughter storming down the sidewalk like she was chasing a departing bus," she said, stepping in. Marjorie laughed, the sound bubbling up easier than she expected. Perfect timing. They carried the coffees to the balcony, settling into their chairs as a container ship crept down the river, its low horn echoing off the historic buildings. "So what was this morning's episode about?" Sharon asked. "She wants the venue back." Sharon snorted. "And you said no?" "Of course." They clinked their coffee cups together like champagne flutes. The humor of it, two old friends toasting over a battle well fought, lingered in the air. It was mid-sip when Marjorie's phone buzzed on the table. She reached for it without urgency, expecting another message from a concerned acquaintance or one of Sharon's endless forwarded memes. The name on the screen stilled her hand. Ethan Price. She opened the text. "It's over." The text sat on Marjorie's phone like a dropped stone in still water, small but the ripples reached everywhere. "It's over." She had barely finished reading it when the phone rang. Ethan's name again. She answered, her voice steady. "Ethan." "Hi," he said, sounding both relieved and exhausted. "I just wanted to thank you for being honest with me, for making me think about what I was walking into." Marjorie leaned back in her chair, the warm mug of coffee still in her other hand. "That wasn't my intention," she said quietly. "I wasn't trying to end things for you." "I know," he said, his tone gentler now, "but you showed me a side of her I couldn't ignore anymore. I'm moving my things out this afternoon." Through the open balcony door, a light breeze stirred the curtains. Somewhere below, a trolley bell chimed, its old brass ring a strange soundtrack to the dismantling of her daughter's engagement. "I'm sorry it came to this," Marjorie said. "I'm not," he replied. "Not anymore." He hesitated, then added, "You deserve someone who treats you with respect." "So do I." When the call ended, she stayed still for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the building settling filling the space. By noon, the fallout began to spill onto social media. Lena's latest post, "Funny how people you trust most will drive someone away, just to feel powerful." The comments came fast, some consoling, some prying. A few friends tagged each other, trading guesses about who the target was. Marjorie didn't reply. She slipped Molly's harness on instead, the cat's soft purr rumbling under her palm. Molly, blissfully unaware of the drama, trotted at the end of her leash as they walked the courtyard. The brick path was warm underfoot, the air scented with late-blooming jasmine. A fountain trickled in the center, masking the distant traffic noise. Neighbors waved in passing, some offering casual hellos, others giving her the kind of curious looks that suggested they'd seen Lena's posts. Marjorie just smiled and kept walking, letting Molly stop to sniff at tufts of grass. When they returned upstairs, Sharon was waiting on the balcony, sunglasses perched on her head and a grin on her face. "Well," she said, "the gossip's out. He's gone." "He's gone," Marjorie confirmed, unclipping Molly's harness. Sharon handed her a folded paper menu from the little Italian place on Bay Street. "Then I say we celebrate. Dinner tonight, pasta, wine, maybe dessert if we're feeling wild." Marjorie smiled, the weight in her chest lighter than it had been in weeks. "You read my mind." They spent the afternoon making loose plans, where to park, whether to sit inside or outside, which dessert they'd share. It was the kind of easy conversation Marjorie realized she'd been missing, free of demands or manipulations. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan, and it wasn't Lena. It was Tom Hendricks. Marjorie, the text read, "Do you want to update your will?" Marjorie didn't sleep much after Tom's text the night before. She lay in bed staring at the soft glow of the street lamp through her curtains, listening to the faint hum of cars crossing the bridge. Her mind kept circling the same truth. Lena had been operating under the unspoken assumption that one day everything with Marjorie's name on it would be hers. The apartment, the savings, even Molly. The thought no longer sat right with her. At 8:03 a.m., she picked up the phone and dialed Tom's office. He answered himself, his tone brisk but warm. "Tom," she said, skipping any small talk, "I want to change my will." Today, there was a pause on the other end, the kind where you could almost hear someone nodding. "All right, come in before lunch. I'll clear the schedule." By mid-morning, she was standing at the base of his building, a stately 3-story brick with white-trimmed windows, and a brass plaque by the door that read Hendricks and Shaw, attorneys at law. The air was warm, and just a little damp, the scent of fresh-cut grass, drifting from the square across the street. Inside, the reception area smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper. A tall grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner, each measured second underscoring why she was here. Tom stepped out from his office, offering a polite smile. His silver hair caught the light from the tall windows. "Right on time as always." "Come in, Marge." She followed him into the office, where the walls were lined with dark wood shelves crammed with leather-bound volumes. The desk was massive, its surface neatly arranged except for a yellow legal pad and a fountain pen waiting in the center. "So," he said, taking his seat, "how drastic are we talking?" "Her name comes off," Marjorie said, no hesitation. His brows lifted slightly. "Completely, completely." She reached into her bag and pulled out a brochure, sliding it across the desk. On the cover, a young woman in scrubs stood in front of a hospital entrance, smiling. Tom glanced down. "Savannah Regional Nursing Scholarship Fund. I spent 40 years in hospitals," she said. "This way it'll help someone who's earned it." There was a flicker of approval in his eyes as he began typing. The sound of the keys was crisp and purposeful, like each click was erasing an old assumption and writing something cleaner in its place. When he finished, he printed the new document and slid it across the desk. "We'll need one witness." "I brought one." The door opened and Sharon walked in, her sandals clicking against the hardwood. She wore a linen blouse and carried her sunglasses like she'd just stepped off a sunlit patio. "Figured you could use some moral support," she said with a grin. Tom rotated the document so it faced her. "If you'll sign here." Sharon took the pen, her handwriting looping boldly in the witness box. "And here I thought my morning would be boring," she said. Marjorie signed last, her name flowing steadily across the page. She'd signed plenty of documents in her life, leases, contracts, medical charts, but this one carried a sense of finality she could almost taste. "That's it," Tom said once he'd added his own signature. He stacked the papers neatly, tucking them into a folder, filed and secured. "As of today, the nursing fund is your sole beneficiary." The three of them stepped out into the late morning sun. The air was bright and smelled faintly of blooming azaleas from a planter by the curb. Across the square, a street musician strummed a slow bluesy tune, the notes floating lazily through the warm air. "Closure looks good on you," Sharon said as they walked toward a cafe. Marjorie felt it too, that subtle loosening in her chest, like a knot finally coming undone. "It feels good," she replied. They had lunch on the patio, and afterward Sharon went her way, promising to call about dinner plans for the weekend. Back at the apartment, Marjorie slipped off her shoes, poured herself a glass of iced tea, and stepped onto the balcony. The river glistened in the midday sun, tugboats pushing barges upriver while gulls swooped and wheeled above them. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was from Ethan. She picked it up and opened the message. A single photo filled the screen, a floppy-eared golden puppy, sitting in a patch of green grass, looking up with curious eyes. "Meet Daisy," the text read. By the next morning, Tom had already emailed confirmation that the new will was filed, witnessed, and legally secure. The words were dry and clinical, executed, recorded, notarized, but to Marjorie they read like the closing lines of a chapter she'd been dragging for far too long. She sipped her coffee by the window, the Savannah River drifting in slow motion beyond the glass. Sunlight glinted off the water, and the faint sound of a steamboat whistle floated in from downtown. Her phone rang. The caller ID made her pulse slow, not quicken. Lena Clark. Marjorie considered letting it roll to voicemail, but something in her wanted to hear how her daughter would play it this time. She answered with a simple hello. Lena's voice came through soft, almost fragile. "Mom, I've been thinking. We've both said things we regret. Maybe we can find a way to move forward." Marjorie said nothing. She could hear traffic in the background, the faint clink of a coffee cup being set on a table. "I know I messed up with your appointment," Lena continued, her tone teetering between contrition and performance. "But cutting me out of your will? That's extreme. I'm your only child." Still Marjorie kept silent. "You don't understand what this feels like," Lena pressed on. "It's like you're erasing me. I've always assumed," she caught herself, then shifted. "I've always believed you wanted to take care of me." Marjorie let the words hang in the air for a long, deliberate beat, then said evenly, "Assumptions aren't promises." Before Lena could respond, Marjorie ended the call. For a few seconds, the quiet was thick enough to taste. Then she turned back to the kitchen, picked up her coffee, and carried it out to the balcony where Sharon was already waiting with two champagne flutes. "Did I just hear the sound of a phone hitting the chopping block?" Sharon asked, holding one out. "You did," Marjorie said, taking the glass. Sharon raised hers in a toast to decisiveness. The champagne was cold, crisp, and faintly citrusy. Marjorie let it linger on her tongue before swallowing. Later that afternoon, she sat at her desk, logged onto the Scholarship Fund's website, and made a small donation in Molly's name for the next nurse who needs help getting there. The confirmation email popped up instantly, bright and certain, without any of the heaviness that used to follow her decisions about Lena. Molly herself jumped onto her lap, curling into a warm, soft loaf against her sweater. The cat's purr was steady, like a low-running engine. Marjorie stroked her back, feeling the rhythm under her hand. The apartment was still except for that sound, and the faint rustle of leaves outside. The sun had shifted just enough to lay a bright gold bar across the living room rug. Her phone buzzed on the arm of the chair. For a heartbeat, she expected Lena again, one last volley. But when she turned it over, the name on the screen stopped her short. "Ethan Price," she opened the message. "Marjorie, I wanted you to hear from me first. I'm getting married next month. Courthouse. Nothing fancy. I'd like you to be there." Attached was a photo, Ethan in a navy sport coat, smiling beside a woman Marjorie had never seen before. The woman's hair was wind-blown, her grin bright and easy. Between them, leaning forward just enough to nose the camera, was the golden puppy from last week's text. Beneath the photo, Ethan had written, "We'd be honored if you'd stand with us." Marjorie read it twice, the hum of Molly's purr filling the quiet around her. She could almost hear the river outside, moving forward no matter who decided to come along for the ride. The courthouse wasn't built for beauty. Its walls were beige, its windows utilitarian, and its benches designed for short visits, not comfort. But that morning, Savannah's sun came through the tall panes in golden rectangle, softening everything it touched. The light gave the terrazzo floors a faint sparkle and painted the brass door handles like they belonged in a church. Marjorie stepped inside, smoothing the sleeve of her navy dress. The faint smell of floor wax mixed with something metallic in the air, probably from the old vents overhead. The hallway echoed with clipped footsteps and murmured conversations. Somewhere in the distance, a clerk laughed, the sound carrying like a small bell. "Mrs. Clark?" She turned. Ethan was coming down the hall, his stride long but unhurried. He wore a navy sport coat with a pale blue tie, and the expression on his face, half relief, half gratitude, softened him. Beside him walked a woman Marjorie hadn't met, in a cream-colored dress and a peach cardigan. Her hair caught the breeze from a vent, sending loose strands into a gentle frame around her face. She looked approachable, her freckles visible in the sunlight, and her smile without calculation. "Marjorie," Ethan said, stopping before her. "You came. I told you I would," she replied, returning his smile. The woman stepped forward, extending both hands. "I'm Renee Walker. Thank you for being here. I know today's not traditional, but it's exactly what we wanted." Marjorie took her hands. They were warm, steady. Traditional isn't always the goal. A burst of footsteps behind them made them all turn. Sharon appeared, flushed but grinning, her linen dress swaying as she adjusted her bag. "I didn't miss it, did I?" She stuck out her hand toward Renee. "I'm Sharon, unofficial photographer and official troublemaker." Renee laughed, the sound easy and unself-conscious. "We'll take all the help we can get." Ethan's pictures usually come out crooked. They moved toward courtroom B, a small space with wooden pews, polished by years of use. An arrangement of white daisies sat in a vase on a side table, the only decoration. The judge entered with a coffee cup in one hand, setting it aside before looking up at the small group. "Shall we?" she asked, her voice warm but efficient. The ceremony was quick but not rushed. The judge's words were simple, letting Ethan and Renee's faces do most of the talking. Marjorie noticed the way Ethan's thumb rested over Renee's knuckles when the vows were read, the way Renee looked up at him like she'd been waiting for this exact view. "If anyone would like to speak," the judge offered. "We have time for one." Marjorie felt Sharon's nudge. She stood slowly, the pew creaking behind her. "I've seen love in a lot of places," she began. 40 years in hospitals will teach you that it's not about flowers or big rooms, it's about showing up, even when things are hard. It's remembering the small details, the ones that matter to no one else but the person you love. That's the kind of care I see in you two today. I hope you keep choosing it." Renee blinked quickly, and Ethan gave a small nod. The judge smiled. "That's a fine wish." A tap of the gavel, a flurry of signatures, and it was done. Sharon took photos in the hallway, Ethan and Renee under the courthouse seal, a candid where Renee laughed with her head tilted back, Ethan looking at her instead of the camera. Lunch was at a small bistro tucked off a quiet square. The bell over the door jingled as they entered, releasing the smell of warm bread and basil into the air. A window table was pushed together for them, its view framed by a live oak heavy with Spanish moss. Plates arrived one after another. Shrimp and grits, roasted chicken, caprese toast slick with olive oil. Renee laughed when Ethan stole a bite from her plate, and he grinned as if caught in a harmless crime. When the server refilled their glasses, Sharon insisted on a group photo by the window. "Turn toward each other," she instructed. "It's better than staring at me." The shot caught Renee's soft smile, and Ethan's crinkled eyes, more telling than any posed picture could be. Marjorie raised her glass. "To vows that don't need an aisle," she said. to laughter that outlasts the big days, and to the ordinary moments that turn out to be the miracles. The clink of glasses was warm, filling the small space with a quiet affirmation. The rest of the meal passed in easy conversation, with Renee showing Marjorie a photo of Daisy in a crooked red bandana. Sharon promised to print the best shots from the day and deliver them in a proper frame. As the plates were cleared, the light outside shifted to late afternoon gold. Renee looked at Marjorie, a sincerity in her gaze that didn't need dressing up. "I'm glad you're family now," she said. The waiting room was quieter than Marjorie remembered. Maybe it was the late morning hour, or maybe her mind was simply clearer this time. No rush, no frazzled arrival, no one else's schedule pressing against hers. The chairs were upholstered in soft blue, and a faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air beneath the sharper smell of coffee from a small Keurig in the corner. A magazine rack sat by the wall, but she didn't pick anything up. She was content to watch the light move across the linoleum floor, slanting in through the high windows. When the nurse called her name, she rose easily and followed, her sensible flats making no sound against the hallway tile. The blood pressure cuff hissed softly as it inflated around her arm. The thermometer beeped once and then again for confirmation. The nurse smiled. "Numbers look great." Dr. Patel entered a few minutes later, flipping through her chart. "Well, Marjorie, looks like you've been taking good care of yourself." He asked the usual questions, listened to her lungs, checked her reflexes, and then leaned back with a satisfied nod. "Everything's right where it should be. Keep doing what you're doing." No dramatic pauses, no raised eyebrows, just the clean bill of health she'd been waiting for. Marjorie felt something in her chest loosen, a knot she hadn't realized she'd been carrying since that day Lena had stolen this moment from her. By the time she stepped back into the sun, Savannah's light was spilling generously across the sidewalks, bouncing off the windows of passing trolleys. The air carried the briny hint of the river, mingled with the sweeter smell of pastries from the bakery on the corner. She didn't think twice about walking in. The glass case gleamed with rows of fruit tarts, eclairs, and croissants dusted with sugar, like fresh snow. She chose a lemon tart, bright tart, unapologetic, and took a table by the window. The first bite was cool and silky, the citrus cutting through the buttery crust in a way that made her close her eyes for a second longer than necessary. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sharon. "Coffee? I'm 5 minutes away." When Sharon arrived, she carried the day's newsprint under her arm, and that familiar look of someone about to settle in for a proper catch-up. "So," she said, dropping into the seat across from Marjorie, "how's my favorite patient?" "Healthy," Marjorie replied, savoring the word. No warnings, no lectures. Sharon grinned. "Guess I can cancel that fruit basket I didn't order." She waved to the barista, then leaned back. "Feels good, doesn't it? Doing something for yourself without having to explain it to anyone." "It feels better than I expected," Marjorie admitted. Outside the window, a young couple walked past, their fingers laced loosely together. Beyond them, the river glistened in long silver ribbons under the sun, tugboats moving slow and steady toward the bridge. The barista set down Sharon's coffee with a cheerful, "Here you go," and the two women fell into the kind of conversation that only comes when the big storms have passed. Light, skipping from topic to topic, not avoiding the past, but not anchored to it either. Marjorie finished her tart, dabbing the last crumbs with her fork, and looked out at the shimmering water once more. There had been a time, not so long ago, when the day's satisfaction would have depended on Lena's approval or mood. Now it rested entirely in her own hands. She thought about all the cancellations of the last few months, some small, some monumental. Not all had been easy. But sitting here, in the sunlight with her health intact, her friendships solid, and her boundaries firmly in place, she knew she wouldn't trade a single one. Marjorie lifted her coffee in a small private toast. "Some cancellations," she said softly, "are blessings in disguise."